For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for more updates.
Did you know that tomato prices surged by a record 200%? Did you know that the price of a vegetarian thali rose by 28%? Hello and welcome to another edition of Capital Calculus. I am your host Anil Padmanabhan. Last month, retail inflation surged to a 10-month record of 7.4%. Significantly, this round of inflation was led by food items, specifically tomatoes, a staple in almost every Indian household. At the same time, non-food inflation witnessed a deceleration. It brought relief to manufacturers in terms of lower input costs. In short, vegetarians are unhappy, producers are pleased, and incumbent politicians readying for re-election are on the edge. Especially since the brunt of this round of inflation has borne by the not so well off, almost all of whom who vote in every election. To understand the nature of this round of inflation and more, we spoke to Dharmakirti Joshi, Chief Economist at CRISIL. DK, as he is popularly known, is a keen watcher of the Indian economy. I began by asking DK about his perspective on this round of inflation.
Well, generally speaking, inflation is always a cause for worry. But let me put it this way: it's a worry, but it's not a lasting worry. I just want to bring in the example of what happened in the West. I mean, when they took inflation lightly, and then it flared up so much that they're still trying to douse the inflation fires, and it's still not under control. Now, let me try to explain why it's not a lasting worry. The first thing is it is generalized. It's not generalized. It is very localized to food. If I take food inflation now, then the overall inflation is only 4.9%. Now, food is very volatile. It has about, food and beverages have about 45% weight in the overall index. And the food alone has about 40% weight. So what happens is, since it swings wildly from time to time, it can have a disproportionate effect on overall inflation. And currently, it is punching more than its weight. So the central banks typically look through episodes of food inflation which are seen as transitory. But if they become persistent, then they have to step in. So I think that's the situation with the current surge in inflation. And we believe that this surge, which is within food led by vegetables primarily, even though cereal inflation is also in double digit, but vegetables saw around 37% inflation. So as a result, I think it imparts a kind of transitory nature to the inflation episode, because it's not going to last beyond July to September. I think the vegetables have a very short cycle. Although cereal inflation may persist, but vegetable inflation is going to come down. So we have raised our inflation forecast to 5.5% because July-September is going to be more than what we expected. But over the next couple of months after that, we'll see inflation also come down.
So, DK, this food inflation which you highlighted, within that you had this tomato increase, in prices, which some call tomato inflation. But my point is that you are seeing this happen again and again. Either it's in the case of onions, this time it's tomato. So what is this nature of inflation that India suffers from, particularly the last decade or so?
Well, I think there is a category called TOP, which is tomato, onion, and potato. And from time to time, one of them is a villain. Currently, I think the tomato was a villain, and the prices flared very sharply. So if you look at the vegetable category as a whole, I think it's the top inflation is around 53%, and within that, tomato is more than 200% in the month of July. So that is what caused the spike in vegetable and the overall inflation primarily. Now, moving ahead, I think if you look at other vegetables, which is your chilies, ginger, I think inflation everywhere is high, but I think tomatoes made the most noise. So let me try to explain this phenomena. What the economists call is a cobweb phenomena. It was popularized by an economist called Nicholas Calder a couple of decades back. What happens is, let me take you 3 months back. I think there were news of people throwing away tomatoes, or farmers rather throwing away tomatoes, because the prices had crashed, and I think and they could not sell it and make profit. So they had to destroy it to reduce the supply in the system. Now, what that does is it discourages farmers to grow tomatoes, and that's exactly what happened. Typically, the prices would have risen. Maybe tomato would have gone to 100 rupees a kg in a normal scenario. But what happened this year was there was the pest attack, and then you know about the weather. I think the rains have been excessive in the month of July, and that damaged the crops. So the inflation in tomatoes really shot through the roof as a result of that. So now what's happening is, seeing high prices, farmers are aggressively sowing tomato. And already, I think the impact of that is being felt in the system. Tomato prices have started coming down, and within next couple of weeks, they might stabilize back to the pre-high inflation episode. So this volatility is the nature of most agriculture commodities, because they react very sharply to price signals.
So, TK, is it also because all of them are perishable commodities? So, does it also reflect the fact that supply chains, India's cold chain is still a work in progress? Unlike, say, in cereals, which you have more sophisticated, but it's not a perishable exactly. So, is that also the reason?
Well, that is true. I think being perishable makes you more vulnerable to these cobweb phenomena. But I think within cereals, I think we had noticed earlier that the most of the cereals, we have enough stocks of cereals, so government can intervene in the system and stabilize prices. But in the case of pulses, we did see this cobweb phenomena play out for the last couple of years, until government decided to import a lot of pulses, and they also decided to incentivize farmers to grow pulses. So the cobweb phenomena, which is high volatility, which was seen in pulses, has stabilized quite a bit. Now, again, I think inflation is rising for a variety of reasons. Weather is one of them. Last year's crop was bad, and government is trying to shore up supply. That's true. I mean, so it can happen even in non-perishables, because we never had storage for pulses. I mean, so that's the reason. But yeah, I think the perishable category is very, very vulnerable to such shocks, and they respond very quickly. And the population of the country typically have got used to it. If tomato were at 100, it wouldn't have made so much noise. I mean, because people have seen tomato at 100 for several times in the last couple of years.
So, is it also the fact that there is now more demand in the system? I'll explain why. The direct benefit transfer particularly has prevented leakages. And so social welfare programs are actually delivering bang for buck. So is this also creating more demand, which is not bad news in terms of creating more demand, but the supply side is yet to play catch up? Is it that mismatch too?
Well, that is, I think, partly true, I would say, and you are right. I think if you give subsidies, I think you're basically increasing the discretionary spending power of the corporates, because of the population in general, and I think that should reflect in higher consumption of non-food items also. Now that phenomena is playing out. But what has also happened is that while poor have got more income, the richer have become much richer. So the excess demand in the system, that is playing out more in the higher income categories. I mean, the products they consume. For instance, I think if you take the case of SUVs or luxury products, there's a huge demand for them. There's a long waiting period. Same is not the case with the lower ticket items or entry level items, so to say. So that is what you said is absolutely correct. I mean, in terms of higher incomes with the people, and if you compare it with a scenario where I think the subsidy was not given, the demand would have been much weaker from that part. I think that is true. But there is a there is other phenomena which also playing out where the higher income categories are seeing a greater bulge in their income and their greater increase in their purchasing power.
The inflation story so far is that this current surge is likely to be temporary. True, but it has left vegetarians very unhappy and incumbent politicians seeking re-election on the edge.
My colleagues at CRISIL track the what is they call the vegetable thali, the cost of it, and also a non-vegetable thali, and they had very interesting results for the month of June. They found that that the vegetable thali cost had risen by 28%, and the non-vegetarian thali by only by 11%. Because I think meat, fish, I think as per the CPI, the inflation is below 3% in both of them. So now, so the cost of inflation is being borne disproportionately by vegetarians because it's the vegetarian items that have shot up. And this is only for June. I mean, in July, I think things would be the gap between the two would have risen even more. So going ahead, I think, as I said, I think both the vegetarian and non-vegetarian should converge, because I think the prices of vegetables particularly will soften, I think, in the next couple of weeks.
The just concluded Karnataka elections, the electorate uncovered a new touch point for inflation: cooking gas prices. It also signaled growing aspirations. Access to cooking gas in the last 10 years has triggered these expectations. Therefore, I was curious to know, as prosperity spreads, whether India will discover new touch points for inflation that go beyond the traditional staples.
Well, I think you are right. I think the sudden withdrawal of subsidy can create negative sentiment. If I look ahead, I think there are, we were talking about touch points. I think my worry is that the next touch point could be electricity. I think electricity inflation is already 13.5%. If I look, this index has a base of 2011-12. 2011-12 equal to 100. The value of electricity index right now is 148. The overall index is 180. The coal index is at 180, a little over 180, which means that the input costs, from which is coal is a major input for electricity in India, have risen very sharply, and the output prices haven't adjusted. So I think electricity, there is many of the state electricity boards are not in good health. So there is a dire need to either cut losses or to raise electricity prices. I think that an electricity penetration like your gas cylinder has also increased in the economy. So that, I think, that is a touch point. That is why you keep hearing news about electricity subsidy, particularly during the poll. And I think the political parties are trying to improve their electoral chances by offering free electricity, etc., which is not a good thing from a medium-term perspective, because that will put more strain on the fiscal accounts of the states. But I think that the electricity could be another touch point at this juncture.
That's interesting. DK, is it, look at it another way, that these are also aspirations at play, right? In, say, 10 years ago, most people didn't have a cooking gas connection. Electricity access was still an issue. Drinking water was abysmal. So when you meet all these basic needs, aspirations only accelerate. So expectations grow, and that creates more demand. So are we also in all of this, the silver lining is that aspirations are on the rise? I mean, they also reflect aspirations.
No, I would agree. I mean, I would agree with what you say. And I think so that is why it becomes, I think that's why subsidies become such a pain point, I think, when they are withdrawn, because people get used to it. I think and they're, particularly the lower income brackets, budgets can get disturbed. So if it has to be taken, it has to be taken out very gradually over a period of time. I think same thing about the food subsidy that is being currently given. So government did a very good thing to reduce the quantum. So I think slowly, if you reduce it, as people become more capable, they have their incomes rise. I think where they can afford food items with their income. I think then you need to gradually withdraw it. But that's a very tricky thing to do. I mean, it can because it becomes a habit. I mean, so it's very difficult to pull it off.
So is it then fair to say that, the complexity of inflation management in this country is escalating very fast?
It is escalating, and I think the issue there is, I think you need to, most important thing is the food part. I think the food is, because food has such a large weight in our consumer price inflation basket. Although I believe that the weight of food has actually come down. This is 11-12 weight. I think after that, I think the quantum of food consumption has come down, whereas the quantum of proportionately the other things, I think their share in the consumption basket has risen. So the weights need to be adjusted. But even working with the current level of current weights, I think food is very important, and managing food will become very, very critical, because now you are exposed to climate change. I think the weather is becoming more inclement, so you'll see more volatility in food prices going ahead. So I think we need to prepare for managing this volatility.
Several things have become clear to us in our conversation with DK. One, this bout of tomatoflation is temporary. Second, as prosperity goes, so will the complexity of the Indian economy. Third, volatility in prices is going to be par for the course. Finally, going forward, India will continue to discover new touch points for inflation. So yes, be ready for good times, but brace for bad ones too. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to StratNewsGlobal on YouTube. Hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any updates. And if you like the show, please do hit the like button. And please do share your thoughts, ideas and suggestions with us. I'm available on Twitter at Capital Calculus. I'll be back next week with another episode. Till then, stay safe.